Welcome back, everybody, to the Labeled Paranormal podcast. I'm your host, Tom. We're missing Mark. Mark's actually out this week, but he will be back. No worries there. He's off having a good time, but the show must go on. And I have a wonderful guest for all of you today, a little different than our typical paranormal topic, but, you know, the story of fae folk, hobgoblins, and marine cryptids just never get enough love. So I needed a guest on who, can really stretch our reach. We don't want to be too Bigfoot dominant, UFO dominant. We got to spread it out. So I have today a special guest, wonderful guest, Perla K Carino, and she's an emerging author known for her unique blend of poetry and prose. Sorry, her debut book, Twisted Affections, is a collection that explores a variety of common yet often hidden toxic cycles. In her work, she incorporates elements of mythology, fantasy, and biblical references to bring awareness and hope. Ultimately, Perla, your writing is about overcoming, correct?
Right. Yeah, all different kinds of relationships from multi-generational to
Yes.
pets with their owners. Yeah, just all over the place.
My heart. That's wonderful. And yes, your relationships too with our bodies, families, romances, and more on display so we can all decide whether or not we want to continue wearing them. When I read that, I had to say it on air because I love the way you put that. So thank you. That is wonderful. And your work has been well received and a growing following on social media where you share poem snippets and updates about your book. So without taking too much away, I wanted to give a nice introduction to our wonderful audience here. But please take it over, share about your background, what you're currently doing. And I always like to ask, what got you into cryptids or into the paranormal? Maybe not just cryptids.
Sure. So right now I work as in a nonprofit, and I'm definitely a writer kind of person. I wish I was a science person so I could be the one out looking for these cryptids. But yeah, I'll just leave it to, the professionals. But I worked on this book for over a decade. You just slowly putting it together, and yeah, I love mythology and folklore, and so I definitely had to incorporate some of that into my poems.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for doing that because I just don't think, one, there's enough, but I also think the market or that genre is growing, especially with the population, or the younger demographics coming up. It's not as taboo as it once was to talk about,
Right.
Stuff that is scary or stuff that you want to know more about. So I think it's fantastic. And, everybody listening, please go out, I found your book on Amazon. Please go and find it Amazon. And purchase. It's a wonderful reflection. I read your sample on there, and I was blown away. The Amazon, the little sample poem that you had there, I thought that was wonderful. It was very poignant, and I am a writer. We've talked before, and I'm a writer too. So, more power to you with everything that goes on. And that can go on, and what has to go into doing that. So I'm very, for what it's worth, we just met, but I'm very proud of you. So
Thank you.
You're welcome. So let's get into the book a little bit, okay? Let's talk about the short story book, your short story books, and your poems and motivation. What made you want to do this? What made you do? You know what? Enough. I'm going to publish this.
So I actually plan on not publishing it. I was just going to put it in a physical form for my daughter, and just to show, like, oh, I finished a project.
Mm-hmm.
And
hey, that's good too.
yeah, and then I started realizing, these are like stories of hope and stories of things that people don't really talk about. And I realized, I'm kind of scared to talk about these things, and maybe that's why it needs to be out there.
True. Very good point. So when you incorporate your influences, right, on your writing, and just like the little intro that I had written for you, the mythology, the fantasy, the Bible references, to bring awareness and hope. where have you always been a lifelong lover of mythology, fantasy, and the paranormal, or did it come later in life?
So my grandma loved watching X-Files, and
Oh, same here.
she thought it was real. She thought it
Oh,
was a documentary. So
well, it might
that
be.
that yeah. So that led to some confusion. But also I did grow up reading Greek mythology, and yeah, I mean there was a lot of folklore in our family being Hispanic,
Oh yeah.
and so yeah, it's always been definitely in my background. And yeah,
Wonderful. I mean, that hits close to home. I'm from Hispanic descent as well, so all of this stuff was more commonplace than the average household, right? To talk about this
yes,
stuff. It was not, and that's why I like to say, um, when I'm on the other side, I'm getting interviewed, and people ask, how long have you been into this and things like that. I say the same thing that you did. We were an X Files household. We were an Unsolved Mysteries household. It was okay to talk about. It wasn't, that's weird. Why do you want to know that? So I really appreciate that aspect of your background and coming up, that it was something that was talked about. And yes, folklore. I mean, everybody had a story about everything, right? And in
right.
traditional Hispanic style, everybody has a story about everything, and everybody knows everybody. So that's another thing too. But it was wonderful. It was wonderful that you mentioned that. It hit a little close to home. So
Yes.
when
And even
in it,
even the Bible background, I mean, yeah, we always learn, okay, these are things you don't mess with. And so
oh
it
yeah,
definitely
yeah,
kind of
hmm,
even things out of, okay, like this is real. Like, here's also some biblical reference for it. And, either this is something we still can't explain or just something that, okay, we're not going to touch, like just pray about it and leave that alone.
oh yeah, you- you're preaching to the choir. You know how many times I've been slapped in the face with a Bible verse or a reference,
Yeah,
out of nowhere that still somehow made sense to whatever situation you were in. Yeah,
right.
I know all too well about that one. Went through the whole gambit of CCD and all that stuff too. So I really appreciate all of that. But when we talk about and another reference in there is one of your short stories is about hobgoblins, right?
Right.
Um, did you research any bit about the Fey folklore? The hobgoblins or fairies, pixies, things like that. Did you do any research on that? And what do you think about it?
Yes. So I have always looked into all of that kind of stuff. And that's definitely one of those things that I don't mess with because the
Ah,
stories of them are so chaotic. And
yes, yes,
especially like with one kind, you do what they want and they'll give you a reward. The other kind, you do the exact same thing and, they basically kill you.
yep.
So, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's very interesting. And yeah, being in America, we don't have as many like reports of these things, but still, I just thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, we've actually had a podcast on here about the Fey folk or fairy folklore, and you're right. I mean, it's dominated in the UK and Germany and Scandinavia and things like that. We really don't have that many here. Our stories here would be more like forest spirits or things from the Native American lore. But no, you're right about that. That when we think of that stuff, more often than not, like a Tinkerbell type comes to mind, but it's often not like that. If you read the story, they're very
Right.
trickstery. They're very borderline evil. And you're right.
Mhm.
Some will help you. Some will have to blackmail you to help them. And some,
Right.
um, if you see it, turn away and run. Um, I think that's fantastic and wonderful that all of these stories are so different. But you're right. It is something that, hey, if you did see that out, don't don't engage with it. Don't come
Don't
up to
sit
it.
in the fairy ring.
No,
People,
don't.
people are so like trendy into this stuff, and it's like, okay, if you read a little bit, you'd know you don't want to go in those things.
It's true. It's true, and I think it's because it's cute, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's something that is cute to do. It's a great photo op in this photogenic world that we are in now. But if you really, if you know your stuff, you don't want to be around them. You don't. You can get curses. You can get pulled into an alternate reality, the underground, whatever you want to call it.
That's not
Um,
good. Like, you're not going to have fun with them and be their friends. You're going to be their slave. So,
yeah, yeah, which, is hard to imagine because they're yay tall, but when one thing has magic and you don't, hey, come on. You know what I mean? And I think that's fantastic that you wrote about hobgoblins because even in the fairy world, they're overlooked, right? You hear about the pixies and the gnomes and things like that. And, even here's one that I'll tell you, I didn't know, we hear the banshee, right? The
mhm.
wailing, screaming entity when somebody dies and things like that. I had no idea that that was also in the, um, in the fairy world. I didn't know it was an offshoot of that. It's an old
Mhm.
Celtic lore. And yeah, that's pretty scary because, that's not a cute little thing that flies and has fairy dust falling all over it. Um, but no, I appreciate you looking into all of that work, looking into and researching and yes, putting it in there because the term goblin, right? People are like, they're evil, but they're also in the same category as your pixies and things like that. So it's definitely worth paying attention to, I would say. Um, One thing, a little switch gears here, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You, I love the water. So as many of our fans,
Yes.
many of our fans know, many of our fans know, I always talk about the underwater UFOs and underwater spirits and underwater cave systems, underground underwater bases, whatever you want to say, anything under the water, I'm going to go there and I'm going to make a case for it, whether it's right or wrong. But anyway, that's my thing, not yours. uh, so I am a big fan of marine and life. And Nessie, and I think you can agree, Nessie is like your tiptoe. It's the first step into the pool, right, of the
Right.
cryptid world. It's Bigfoot and it's Nessie. And then as you get comfortable with those, then you start looking at all the other things like maybe a skinwalker or the chupacabra and things like that. So when you brought it up that you've been to Loch Ness and you have an interest in marine cryptids, I had to have you on. It's so wonderful, and I just let's start at the beginning, and then we'll get to the trip. When you have what started, you've told me, but tell the audience, what started your love for marine cryptids?
So, as a child, I was at my grandparents' house, the X-Files lover. So, it was a whole
Excellent.
thing of like, did this
Yeah,
really
I'm fans of them.
happen? Yeah, I had to look up, was this, just a episode of a show? And I had to look up and be like, no, it was not. This really happened. So, I was sitting there during the daytime watching live news footage of a helicopter over the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay.
And they were really confused about this huge shadow that they were following. So it was moving in the water. And I didn't know what it was back then. I was probably 5 or 6. And it wasn't until much later when I saw, like in books, depictions of Nessie that I said, oh, hey, that's exactly what was in that water. And
Mm-hmm.
just, the shape of the whole long neck thing. And yeah, so that really got me started into looking into it all.
That's yeah. There's always something that kicks it off, right? There's always something
Right.
that kicks off everyone's love for for anything. It doesn't have to be this. It could be your love of writing, whatever it is in your life. There's something that kicks it off, and you know, news footage in the Gulf of Mexico, seemingly something rather benign, kicked off your love with marine
Right.
biology.
And they never said, oh, okay, like we found what it was, or they never, they just kind of grew tired of it because it went on forever.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if it ended up going, too deep underwater or what. But um yeah, I've also tried to, ask people in different, you know, plesiosaurus
Yeah.
Facebook groups now, has anyone heard of this footage? And yeah, no one's heard of it. So if anyone has seen it, or remembers it from back then, that would be awesome.
Yes, definitely comment if you remember seeing that. There's often, yeah, say it again. I say it every time. I'm a where there's smoke, there's fire kind of person, right? So when you have reports of many individuals who not even live around the area, but vacationers, tourists, things like that, who say they've seen something, I I tend to believe that. If it was only locals, if it was only okay, maybe they're trying to draw to the town, maybe they're mistaking something, although they should be experts because they always see it. You can make an argument, right? I'm not saying it's true, but I'm saying you can make that argument. Uh, News footage really doesn't touch these things. So when you do
Right.
get, when you do get, sorry about that, I just had to bring, when you do get, somebody, you know what I mean? When you do get footage out there, you really need to take it, really hold on to it and really scrutinize it, because why are they putting this on there? Is there an alternative motive? Is it clearly fake and they just wanted to show people fake things? What's going on with that? So when you have something like that and you can notice it on TV, right? So you're watching a rebroadcast of this footage and you could still make it out. Just imagine what the people there live
Right.
saw. You know what I mean? Oftentimes, and being in IT, I try to tell people this. They're like, oh, all these cameras, why are we getting all these bad shots of like criminals and things like that going in? And I said, when you're there, it's a lot clearer. It's a lot clearer than what you see because you're taking an image of the image. You're taking a video of the video. You know what I mean? It's going to
Yeah.
degrade. So whenever you have that and you see these grainy footages and you see these things that, you have to keep in mind that what you're seeing isn't what they saw. And they saw something weird enough that they had to pull their camera out. Also, in the grand scheme of things, right? How the first iPhone was what, 08, right? So we can talk about having cameras and footage and surveillance and every kind of good thing like that. We're only 15 years into having that. You know,
Right.
let's get 100 years into having that and see what footage we get, right?
And I still end up taking blurry pictures all the time of myself. So
Yeah, they never work 100%, right? You'll get a great one, and the next day, it's blurry. The cat doesn't come out right. I don't, it happens. It happens. Um, so when you took your trip to Loch Ness, you found something very interesting there. I am so excited for you to tell our listeners what you saw. So please go ahead with your story, and I'll share when you want me to. All right.
sure. So this was last fall, and apparently they had just had like the largest search for Nessie in Loch Ness, and I missed it by like a weekend or two. Very upset about that. But yeah, so I went in obviously not expecting to see anything crazy, which I didn't see anything crazy, just to, not freak y'all out about what you're gonna hear. But we went with a bus tour, and everyone was going to go on the little boat tour. And I told them, nope, I'm not going on that with everybody else because Nessie's not going to be where everyone is looking for her. and
Duh.
and I
Nessie
said,
101.
right. And they said, well, wait, we're going to see Nessie. And I said, well, when you see Nessie, I'm going to be writing her. So be ready for that. And my husband and I, we just got our little lunch and tried to find a little secluded place to picnic. And we wanted to be, next to the water. And so we just kind of like kept going farther and farther away from people where there were a lot of ducks. Didn't know that
Mm-hmm.
ducks was a huge thing in Loch Ness. And I love looking at rocks. So the water is extremely black and murky. You can't see anything in it. And so I just kind of like walk out into the water a bit. I was wearing sandals, even though it's super cold, and just kind of grab some rocks from the bed. And then I just bring them back, out of the water, just kind of look at them. And yeah, if you want to show them, I found
Okay.
several rocks that are so extremely shiny, like crazy. I've never seen anything like it. I did not see anything like this at any of the other locks in Scotland, and it's amazing. And so I wonder if, there's like meteorite or something in there. And the people from our bus store,
Nope,
no one else saw any rocks like this. I mean, there's a huge variety of different pebbles and rocks in the loch, but no one else saw things that were just so extremely shiny. Like this whole thing that you're seeing is just
mm-hmm.
covered in like this silver metallic, and it doesn't crumble, so it's not like a mica. But yeah, it's just amazing. So I'm
Yeah,
wondering if
and that
anyone knows anything about rocks, let us know.
yeah. What are we looking at here in terms of rocks, guys? We have let me get this one up too. Just we do have two. We come
Yeah,
with multiple rock here. We
that
come with
first
multiple rock.
one, yeah,
There
the
you go.
first one is the shiniest and just covered in, just little spectrals.
Yeah, and so your first impression when you see something like this, right? Where does your mind go?
I didn't know. I just thought it's something different that's very unexpected. Like maybe, needs to be tested or something. And then I have a friend who was like, he did just a little rock ID thing on the phone. And he said,
Yeah.
seems to be like it's what meteorite is made of. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's really far. Where like that would be awesome, but it's also just a little phone ID. So I don't know.
Well, it to me, and that was a total setup question because I wanted to answer it, so sorry. But
Okay.
um to me, I do something gets that shiny through extreme pressure and obviously water because you need it to sand itself basically, lack of a better word. And please don't kill me on saying sanding on in a rock because I'm just trying to work off the cuff here. But it definitely looks like something was hot and something cooled it and something you know um smoothed it out, right?
Right.
um it wouldn't it wouldn't be out of the realm of questioning to say possibly that or the Loch Ness, right, was impacted at some point in its history. And obviously not anytime recently, we all would have known
Right.
about it, but at some point in its history or somewhere close to it by an asteroid, a meteor, whatever it is. And to me, right, this is more of a piece to the puzzle than the puzzle,
Right.
where if that happened and this chunk right here eventually came to the surface because water's forever making lakes and rivers deeper, right? So you got to a point where it was uncovered by the weight of the water and then the erosion that happens underneath, that you uncovered a piece of the puzzle, which could have been the meteor that had hit Loch Ness. And on top of that, if that happened, maybe somewhere underneath, we know there's underground lakes, we know there's
Mhm.
underground rivers, we know that that's not me saying that, a scientific fact.
Yes.
Could
And
that
that was
impact?
in the recent finding. They said that there were a lot more underwater caverns than they thought.
Perfect. Yeah, and with modern technology, of course they're going to be finding that, and whatever they find in 10 years will probably disprove what they find today, and that's
Right.
just how science works. So seeing that, hearing that, looking at this, could it have hit at the right point to open up that channel between one ecosystem and another? By what I mean is allowing a pathway from Loch Ness to whatever biome was in underneath. I don't have the answer. I'm not going to say that's definitely what it is, but I'm saying the argument can be made that if you're finding pieces of debris and rock and sediment that do not have an origin on this planet, how can you rule anything out then?
Right. Yeah.
So,
Or something to do with portals.
cool. Oh, let's get into portals. I love that. Nature has many natural portals. If you bring a K2 meter, anything to measure EMF to a volcano, there's no man-made electricity in a volcano. No one's going to be up there, but that thing is off the charts. And a volcano with molten hot lava being a portal is a great great idea, because we are not going in there. You can be perfectly alone. We are not going to mess around with you. And also, to the underwater point, we as humans are terrible in the water. We can't swim. We can hardly float. we, we are just not made for the water, right? So, if you were going to be an intelligent species living here, wouldn't you go to a place? We're the dumb puppy, right? That house gets. We're crashing into everything. We're breaking things. We're knocking things over, and the older, sophisticated cat just hops up on the, like top of a dresser or something and judges us down there because it knows we can't get there. So could this be doing the same thing? Could a species be doing the same thing like that, hiding, in an area we can't find it? Until now, with the whole evolution of humans, until now, we're just realizing there's more underground caves, right? In Loch Ness.
Right. Yes.
If there's anything in there, they've known it for a long time. They've had a wonderful hiding spot. So yes, thank you for that story, because this evidence to me is wonderful because it opens up a question. And I think that's all that evidence should do, is open a question up that could lead to us thinking in a different way, right? Or thinking critically. So I really thank you for that piece of evidence and sharing it with all of us. So let me ask you this. What makes the public love cryptids? Like, what does a good cryptid story need to have, in your opinion?
I think a bit of chaos.
Okay.
I think that's what they love. They don't like things that are like, super bunch of rules, so
Yeah,
that it makes it
I can agree with
easy
that.
to find or easy to interact with. We know with some Nessie stories or, just other marine reptile stories where they can come on land and kind of flip around a little bit. So, why we don't see it in the water right now? Oh, well, it might be out in the forest. Or, it's not purely an animal. It might be part spirit too. And so, it kind of gives way for excuses for why we don't see it. And I
I,
think
I
people
I love
people like
that.
that.
I love that, and I'm totally with you in the portal realm, in terms of maybe it isn't here. Maybe
Right.
we're just seeing a thinning of the veil between one dimension, one reality, and the next. And
Yes.
that's what you're seeing, where you're never going to get proof in this dimension, in this realm. You're never going to get proof of that, because if it were to pass away, it's going to be in its own, it's going to leave its remnants in its own area, which is a wonderful way to think, but also very sad that you'd never be able to get there and get to see it that way. But I often think that too, with cryptids on the surface, right? I've had many discussions with people that, you know, some think Bigfoot's a real, you know, um, humanoid creature, primate, and it's in this world. And I'm like, well, let's pause, because there's a lot of sightings and then there's no real hard evidence. I said, what can balance the two? Well, if it an alternate dimension, alternate realm, whatever you want to call it, well, that one kind of fits a little of both, doesn't
Right.
it? So yeah, I'm glad you brought up the portal thing, because I often do think of that, and what it could be, and where it could be. But also, what you said is pretty funny, because imagine if it was on land and people are flocking to the shore, they're looking out into the water, and here it comes behind them walking in.
Right.
People, just, I think that would be hilarious.
That would be
um,
terrifying.
I think so too. But from me over here in Philadelphia, I think it would be funny.
Right.
Yeah. Um, do you have any other paranormal experiences?
I do. They're a little all over the place. I definitely have experiences with like praying and like hearing things from that. Um,
Really?
yeah, like trumpet sounds, that kind of thing. Especially, I really like experiences when you weren't expecting anything. Like,
Yes.
those are the ones that I feel are more credible, you know? Especially like as someone you would think, oh, she loves Nessie, when she goes to Loch Ness, she's gonna expect to see something. No, I really wasn't.
Well,
And
what you found really wasn't about Nessie, though. You know what I
right,
mean?
exactly.
Even when you were trying.
exactly. So, and I even told my husband, maybe if people are just too nice to Nessie. And so, like, I, threw a sandwich at the ducks and I was like, eat it, Nessie. Like, get over here, fatty. Like,
Yeah,
I want to see ya.
yeah.
That
Let
didn't
it
work
pick
either,
up
though.
let it pick up on that.
Yeah.
Oh man, but I just want to thank you so much for being on my podcast, and I really appreciate all the time that we spent together and answering the questions. And I want to wish you the best of success. But right now, before we go, I'm going to turn it over to you. Promote anything that you would like. Please let our audience know where they can find you. Social media, websites, your book. Please go ahead. Time is yours.
Sure. So this is my book, Twisted Affections. You can find it on Amazon, and I also have a Facebook and Instagram, Perla K Carino author, and you can find some poem and story snippets there, as well as some of the different live poetry readings I've been doing in several states, and that's been a lot of fun. And yeah, so the a poem that kind of incorporates marine reptiles is basically Bible fan fiction, and it
Oh,
is it is if the serpent was a sea serpent. And so it kind of gets into humans' need to explore and to have more knowledge and how that gets us into trouble.
it
And
does.
and then also the short story at the very end is about a hobgoblin, and I really enjoy the description that I put in there of it. It's a little different. Yeah, so check it out. And thank you so
Yes.
much for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Perla. Please go buy her book. And I apologize for saying Carino, not Carino, because I definitely noticed the accent mark and I messed that up. So my apologies. But yes, please go support her. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the Labeled Paranormal podcast, where we touch on everything labeled paranormal. Leave us a review, 5 stars. And you can listen to us anywhere you get your podcast, even a smart speaker, say Amazon Alexa, please play Label Paranormal. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in this week, and we will talk to you next time. Have a good night, everybody.